In Psalm 107, verses 23 and 24, we read these words, "They that go down to the sea in ships, that do business in great waters, these see the works of the Lord and his wonders in the deep." In the story of Jonah, the shipmates had to cast Jonah into the sea to calm the raging storm that would have resulted in the destruction of the ship and loss of life. Sure enough, when they cast him out, the storm ceased instantly. Then it says in verses 15 and 16 of Jonah chapter 1, "So they took up Jonah and cast him forth into the sea, and the sea ceased from her raging. Then the men feared the Lord exceedingly, and offered a sacrifice unto the Lord, and made vows." These men witnessed the works of the Lord and his wonders in the deep. I doubt they understood it as a shadow of Christ and him crucified, but maybe they did in some limited way. They certainly understood the need for a sacrifice for our sins. Jonah was the shadow of Christ being cast into the deep as a sacrifice to silence the violent storm of God's wrath. God uses the ship as a picture of the church sent out as fishers of men upon the many waters of the nations and multitudes of peoples. The study, Deep Things of God, Wonders in the Deep, covers all of this. So how do believers see his wonders in the deep? They now see them through the voice of the Lord, his word. You don't have to be on a boat. Your life doesn't have to be threatened by the raging waves of the sea. We read in Revelation chapter 1, verse 15, beginning in verse 13. "And in the midst of the 7 candlesticks, one like unto the Son of Man." Then, in verse 15, "And his feet like unto fine brass, as if they burned in a furnace, and his voice as the sound of many waters." This shows the many waters from a different perspective. There are the many waters upon which the great whore sits, from Revelation 17. And there is the Lord's voice described as many waters. We see the same description in Ezekiel chapter 43, verse 2. "And behold, the glory of the God of Israel came from the way of the east, and his voice was like a noise of many waters, and the earth shined with his glory." The Bible uses the figure of many waters for 2 completely different purposes: the waters associated with Babylon and the waters associated with God's voice. Why does the Bible say his voice is like many waters? Why does he describe people as waters? Honestly, I'm not sure why, but he does. These are the words and terms we have to reckon with. It should be obvious that it must be understood spiritually. If we take them literally or try to apply some physical, earthly meaning, we'll be far more confounded and we'll be left with a totally unsatisfying answer. Let's read some verses in Jeremiah 51, starting with verses 54 and 55. "A sound of a cry cometh from Babylon, and great destruction from the land of the Chaldeans, because the Lord hath spoiled Babylon, and destroyed out of her the great voice. When her waves do roar like great waters, a noise of their voice is uttered." These waters are entirely associated with the whore of mystery Babylon of Revelation 17, right? These are the unsaved from every nation throughout the world over whom she rules. Their voices roar like great waters, speaking deceit and blasphemies, false gospels, and all abominations against God. But in verse 16 we read, "When he uttereth his voice, there is a multitude of waters in the heavens, and he causeth the vapors to ascend from the ends of the earth. He maketh lightnings with rain, and bringeth forth the wind out of his treasures." The waters associated with God's voice is above in the heavens. That Babylonian whore has no authority over them. Now let's take a look at a slight variation. In addition to the voice of the Lord sounding like many waters, it says in Psalm 29:3 that the Lord and his voice is upon the waters. The voice of the Lord is upon the waters, the God of glory thundereth. The Lord is upon many waters. The voice of the Lord is upon the waters because his voice is being proclaimed to those peoples, nations, and tongues that are typified by the many earthly waters. It's like the rain falling from the heavens. More on this later. There's a lot to digest because so much is going on. Therefore, I put together this illustration that I think will help. It will keep everything in one screen without losing the context of all the symbols working together. It all started in the lower right-hand corner with verses 23 and 24 of Psalm 107. Well, actually, it started with the phrase, the deep things of God in 1 Corinthians chapter 2. We keep talking about Jonah because it's so essential to the discussion. That brought us to Psalm 107 along the way. It was the phrase, great or many waters, that expanded this whole thing. That led to defining many waters as people, the mass of humanity from every nation over whom the whore of Babylon rules. All of that was taken up in the lower left-hand corner. The ship has been kind of weaving its way through all of it. They that go down to the sea in ships and do business in great waters is the church. She is sent to the nations and multitudes in many waters to catch men. The disciples launched into the deep and saw the works of the Lord catching a multitude of fish. Jesus then told them they would catch men. The top part of the illustration depicts what we covered in this study, the many waters of God's voice. In another study, we're going to look at why Revelation 19 says that there was a great multitude in heaven whose voices were as the sound of many waters. I want to read from Psalm 77, verse 19. Thy way is in the sea, and thy path in the great waters, and thy footsteps are not known. Is God wandering about in the sea and roaming the ocean floors? No, of course not. His way is in the sea because Christ went down into the deep to lead his people through those waters. It's a picture of deliverance from death and hell. The shipmates who cast Jonah into the sea saw his wonders in the deep when they were spared by means of a sacrifice, Christ and him crucified. True believers see Christ crucified in the deep, in the many heavenly waters of his voice, the Bible.